You asked for it, and here it is, the Hearthstone Darkmoon Races Meta Report. And what better source than my favorite source for meta reports, Vicious Syndicate. This report is a little over a week old, but it still holds up for the most part since there's been no changes to the metagame. I'm your host JJ, let's do this. So as I said, this is one of my favorite sources for Hearthstone meta reports, because this report tends to be very spot on. And they also tend to give deck lists for every single archetype, as they would suggest to build it, based on a lot of high-level competitive players. So they really know what they're talking about, and it really shows when you actually play their decks. When you go to, for example, HS Replay, for free you're only gonna get, the bottom half of the ladder is playing. It's not very interesting for higher-level play. And if you actually look at any kind of deck codes, you're gonna be able to choose between a bunch of them, which probably have some good ones in between there, but the most popular one isn't necessarily the best one. And the one that H0 shows most winning is probably also not accurate, so this is my favorite source for this. And I guess we're just gonna go over this real quickly. I believe I already said I'm gonna leave a link to this article in the description below. Here they show their sample sizes, always good for statistics, but not all that relevant to us. They have the class archetype distribution, showing how popular the decks are at various ranks. I generally like to look at D1 to D4 for a lot of these stats. Popularity is only really relevant if you're planning to tech against a certain very popular deck, or if you try to specifically play a counter strategy. Those might have changed a little bit over the week, so they're not the most reliable thing, because that is through January 21st and 29th, they've released it on the 31st, so the data is a bit old here, but it's probably going to be relatively representative of the metagame. What I find a lot more interesting, though it is worth noting that various more aggressive rogue varieties with the combo rogue and the aggro rogue being popular is something to keep in mind, as well as, of course, Pure Paladin and the Cheese Paladin, which we'll get to later. Class frequency, the weekly chart is completely useless, except for interesting statistical data, but as you can see, this goes way back. The daily is a tad bit more interesting, but I don't find it that interesting, so there's some discussion which I'm going to skip because I'm providing the commentary here today. If you want to read their commentary, go to the article. Matchups. This grid is very useful. You can look at different ranks. I think in this case you just go to all, because matchups aren't going to change much with rank. If matches take place at low rank, you can assume a bit less player skill possibly, but that would generally be the case on both sides, so any sort of discrepancies that are there for really high level players ranking through really quickly is going to be offset by the fact that they're going to be on both sides of the matchup. So that's one of those things where you can definitely look at the full data set. This is not a picture you generally just look at for fun. You'd either have a deck that you're trying to face against, or a deck that you are playing, and then trying to look at it then. So not that interesting. Also, by the way, you can see there is what looks like a drop down here, but it's just an image in this case. But if you click on the image, it's going to open the link to where there actually is the drop down menu. But it's still working off of the same data set as here, so it's not like you can get anything more up to date with that. The power rankings, that's the tier list. That's where it gets really interesting. They have it by default on top 1k legend. I personally like looking at D1 to D4, because what I always find most interesting is the aspect of climbing the ladder. And while it is to be assumed that the top 1k legend players are probably a bit more serious than some of the lower level legend players, where they I've reached legend, I don't need to be competitive anymore. But this is the people trying to reach legend. This is what I think is interesting to most people, even if you're not necessarily in Diamond right now. The metagame at Diamond is still more indicative of what is optimal than the metagame at a lower tier, even if you're playing there, so this is what you want to look at. And as you can see, the best deck in the metagame, not by as far as I've seen in other lists. H3Play used to list it as over 60% at one point, but the Cheese Paladin. What is the Cheese Paladin? Well, it is a ramp paladin. It's been described as, some people have called it Murloc Paladin, which I think is a bit misleading, because it is based on Murlocs in part. It's not all that it does. It runs no zone with a timeless to ramp really fast. It runs Allura and Tip the Scales in an attempt to get a full board, with Tip the Scales being the only spell in your deck, and then use Wand Maker or the coin to activate it. Very, very interesting deck, very expensive deck. It has like a million legends in there, by which I mean like, I want to say 10. Like that deck is insane to build. If you have it, it seems very fun to play, but it's not exactly in my budget. Zoo Warlock, that's very up my alley and in my budget. Almost as good, and the second best deck right now. Aggro Demon Hunter, we're gonna see a lot of very similar ideas of just aggro decks. Wilbur Rogue, as I said, relies on the combo mechanic a lot, and the Whirlwind Master, of course. Master? Is it? Anyways, you know what I mean. Pure Paladin has been in the meta for a long time now as well. Interesting enough that it is Pure that is listed here, and Broom is also there. So yeah, both varieties of Liber Paladin are still around. Token Druid, speaking of varieties, there's two. There is the Treant and the Gibberling variety. The Gibberling variety has been shown to be more successful, though the matchups differ quite a bit, so if the meta shift is possible, that Treant will overtake Gibberling, but given the current meta, that's not the case. Face Hunter, not much to say about that. Again, very aggressive deck. Already mentioned Librum, Highlander Hunter, solid as always. Aggro Rogue, one of the most popular decks right now. As a matter of fact, I think it's the single most popular deck. And Enrage Warrior. I'm gonna quickly just read out the titles for the tier 2 decks, not that you could do that yourself, but Aggro Shaman, Totem Shaman, Secret Mage, Dual Paladin, Secret Rogue, Soul Demon Hunter, Control Warrior, and Bomb Warrior. It is worth noting that I've seen more recent data that says that Highlander Mage, which is currently listed in tier 3, actually has a 51 point some percent win rate. I think it was 51.8, putting it right around Aggro Shaman, but still tier 2 nonetheless, not a tier 1 deck. Here we have a graphic that I really like. It's kind of both the popularity and the win rates in one neat graphic. So on this side it's how often this deck is played. On this side it has how strong it is. You can see the strongest deck is Cheese Paladin, as we said. The most popular deck is Aggro Rogue. And then you can see Token Druid is kind of the closest to what they call the meta peak, where it's both very popular and very good. Zoo Warlock slightly less good, but a lot less popular. And Rage Warrior, more popular than Zoo, but less successful, and so on and so forth. It looks a bit different if you look at different ranks, so you'll see that a lot of top legend players are playing the Cheese Paladin, while the lower ranked players are generally favoring a bit more aggro-heavy matchups. That's relatively normal for the climb, which is why it's also interesting to sometimes look at the legend decks, because up there it's not as much about the pure amount of games you can play, but rather actually about win rate, even more so. Again, more discussion here about the different stuff, and then we come here to the analysis, and where it shows every viable deck for a class, and even some that aren't viable and isn't over 50% win rate, but are still somewhat playable. Which is what by the way, I think I mentioned this earlier, this is one of the best aspects of this report I always find. Like, if you're looking for a playable deck, you're going to find a quick explanation of how it works, and a deck list right down there. And then you can do it for any deck. It mentions both varieties of Token Druid in here as well, and you can see that there's deck lists for both. And so this is just viewable for every class, you know, and just boop, there it is, Zoo Warlock. If you want it, there it goes. You know, if you want to see whatever they recommend for the Cheese Paladin, here it is. They call it Vision Cheese Paladin because it's Murlocs. Though, again, most varieties seem to have it. And it has a quick meta breaker. Cheese Paladin is a meta breaker. I mean, I guess it isn't that popular in lower ranks. And Token Druid. And yeah, you can support them in whatever. Here's all the people that were involved with it. Comment section below if you want to interact with that. But if you do want to leave a comment about the current Hearthstone meta, I would recommend you leave it in our comment section below this video. I'm going to also release a report on the upcoming changes to Hearthstone, probably tomorrow, about the new core set, and I think this kind of covers it as a basic overview. Leave decklist suggestions for any of the popular archetypes, or maybe something that you think is underrated right now, in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content or anything else. You know, feedback, also comments. I said this before. Like, comment, subscribe. Join the Discord server, link in the description below, and that's it.